Welcome once again, and let's take you through the newspapers and share with you the major stories making headlines across Nigeria this Monday morning, the last Monday in 2024. We kick off with the Daily Independent this morning and share with you our stories on the Daily Independent. We, of course, see their 2025 budget. Federal government earmarks 55.5 billion naira for presidential air fleet, proposes 8.6 billion naira to repair navigational equipment. NSIB plans 2 billion naira for construction of Yola and Delta offices. New listings, bank recapitalization shaped NGX growth in 2024. And also Nigeria Navy capable of building world-class ships, says CNS. Well, why don't they then? Wike replies Odili says he lacks integrity expected of an elder statesman. We can also see here Lagos to conduct local government polls in 20 local government areas, 37 LCDAs in 2025, says the APC. SERAP asks Tinubu, Shatima, and others to make asset declarations public. And final story this morning. Not a final story. Lagos government heads to Supreme Court over acquittal of doctor in sexual assault conviction. And a really sad story with the South Korean plane crash. The last week really has been filled with, one aircraft, issue or the other. There's one in Kazakhstan that started it. South Korea became worse, and there's about two others that I've also seen in the last week. But these are the major stories on the Daily Independent newspapers this morning.
All right, let's punch you with the headlines from the Punch, even though we say no to violence. Nigeria-Niger border towns live in fear over brewing row. Communities in border states plead for peaceful resolution. Debunk Niger leaders' claims of French troops in Nigeria. Federal government sympathizes with South Korea as 179 die in plane crash. Senate gets budget panel report on the 31st of January. In-laws defilement. Lagos challenges convicted doctors' acquittal at Supreme Court. If you recall this case, this was the one that actor Kate Henshaw spoke so strongly about. And, there was a lot of excitement about the fact that he had been arrested and convicted, and now Lagos State is challenging this acquittal. Nigeria gets World Bank $1.5 billion subsidy removal for tax bills, and new Oral Bokun gets staff of office and begins right. I brought you back to life politically. Wike slams Odili. Wow. Political Jesus. Ex-US President Jimmy Carter dies at 100. And final story, CBN misappropriated 2.7 trillion interest on Ways and Means, says Auditor General. Final story or final paper is The Nation newspaper.
Oh, this Nigeria, actually. This Nigeria says here, Rivers crisis, Wike tackles ex-governor Odili. Between him and myself, who has turned Rivers State into his personal estate? His wife is a chairman of governing council, his daughter is a commissioner, his other daughter is a judge, he is the general overseer. How to keep inflation down in 2025, experts task federal government's economic team. War on terror, army will defend Nigeria's sovereignty, chief of army staff vows. And final story, SERAP asks Tinubu to direct CCB to publish the president's and vice president's assets. These are the stories on the newspapers. Let's quickly bring in Dotun Ojon, who's joining us this morning. I'm not sure if you start with the SERAP story or the River
Wike story.
Your pick.
Okay, let's talk about tradition in Rivers. Traditionally, in Rivers, since democracy returned in 1999, it's always been that this governor will fight his predecessor, and that's been the story. So what we're saying today is not new. I flipped back quickly when I listened to Wike yesterday, and I actually saw that it was actually true that former Governor Odili had actually praised him to high heavens when he was governor, simply because of the fact that former Governor Amechi denied him an opportunity to be a real former governor during his 8-year tenure. And so when Wike became the governor in 2015, he brought him back to the corridor of power. The essence of political this thing in Nigeria today is for interest to continue to be protected. So when you talk about interest, you will have all of these things. And the prayer I always pray, and the advice I always give politicians at the end of the day is that let the interest of the people actually matter to you. It's not about who you are at the moment. It's about how the people can actually take delivery of dividend of democracy. So I understand the back and forth. And of course, I also see that whosoever is coming after the man there presently is also going to fight him. It's a political tradition that anybody has not been able to stop in Rivers. So it's not new. We'll continue to hear this back and forth.
Yeah. But I mean, it's also a little strange, you know, he has some weaknesses to fault with everybody. You know, I mean, there's almost nobody who he hasn't had, you know, some tussle with, you know, in the top leadership in River State, you know, from Rotimi Amechi to Simfubara, now Peter Odili, and his wife.
Okay, just as I said the other time, everybody has had a share of their own fight at one point or the other in River State. So, and that's why I call it the culture of the people.
Yeah.
And of course, for him to have been governor for 8 years, it means that somehow the people voted for him. I want to believe. So, and I've often said it, even on this platform, that the kind of leaders you vote for determines your destiny direction as a state. So, he has not changed his character. He's been this person, the people voted for him. He's been this person, former Governor Amechi nominated him to be Minister of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. He's been this person, he was Chief of Staff to the Governor. He's been this person, he was Chairman of the local government. So somehow, every community gets the kind of leadership it deserves, not the one he wishes for or prays for.
Yeah.
All right. Let's now go to the SERAP story. SERAP has asked Tinubu to direct CCB to the Code of Conduct, the CCB to publish President and VP's assets. That was not the only paper that took it. This Nigeria wasn't the only paper. I believe...
It's also on the Daily Independent.
Yes, on the Daily Independent as well. So let's get your thoughts. Do you think that that's something that will happen?
The freedom, I think that would be unnecessary because the Freedom of Information Bill has actually made it very clear that if you want to know what the president has, you can actually make an application to that effect. It's not necessary that we put it in public place if they do not desire it to be in public place. But one thing I always clamor for is that let's try as much as possible to abide by the laws of the country. What are the laws of the country? Declare your asset. And most often, we do not know how these people get to declare their asset. We do not know what they have. You always get to the marketplace and you hear speculation. Oh, this person owns this person owns this. And at the end of the day, when you go to the bureau, the CCB, you discover that some of the assets that are traceable, that people say they own, they don't get to declare them. I think that's the point that SERAP is trying to make. But if you remember, SERAP has over 100 cases in several courts in Nigeria. And I do not want anybody to, these are sensitive matters. I do not want any organization to come across as a student union fight where you just go to court and at the end of the day, you don't bring anything out of it. I want SERAP to concentrate on the various court cases they already have and bring home something instead of instituting new ones at every point. Hardly can you see within a month that you will not read about SERAP taking somebody to court, and you don't get to hear of what becomes of those cases that they already have in court. I appreciate what they are doing, but I think we should concentrate, and it could also be a way of distracting them. You know, when you have too many court cases, you get distracted, and at the end of the day, you don't bring home anything. I want them to concentrate on the court cases they've instituted instead of always bringing up.
So why do you think that a number of the court cases that they've instituted, some of them have not been able to come to a logical conclusion? Do you think it's because they're not doing a good enough job, or do you think that they've been frustrated by Nigeria's criminal justice system?
The thing is that it's not about SERAP alone. Sometimes you just, I don't want anybody to go check out what's happening in Nigeria prison. People are on awaiting trial lists, and they spent 14 years. 15 years waiting for trial. What can be worse than that? So we have a low pace in our justice dispensation system, and you just get to know that court continues to adjourn, they continue to adjourn without end. So it's not just about SERAP, it's about our judicial system in Nigeria. Justice is really very, very slow to come by in Nigeria, and I think it's going to be like this for a long time, as long as politicians always dip their hand and their brain into what is happening in our courts in Nigeria.
Okay. Yeah. And also, is it, I mean, can the president, right, because if you remember during the media chat, he spoke about his fight against corruption, or he was questioned about, you know, his fight against corruption, which, you know, a lot of people said that his response was unsatisfactory. You know, he was speaking about increasing minimum wage and whatnot. But, you know, if he has not been able to declare, you know, his assets, you know, like SERAP is demanding, can he, publicly, exactly, can he, you know, claim to truly be against, corruption and be fighting corruption in Nigeria and, you know, be completely sincere with the Nigerian people?
You see, every leader or every one person has their mindset. Leadership mindset determines leadership decision. There are some leaders that will come, for example, Trump. I was listening to him and he said he was not going to take salary. That's his own leadership style. And there are some leaders who will think, because what we need in Nigeria today is what I call them, what's it called? Inspirational leadership. And one of the qualities is for somebody to be able to come out there to inspire the people to hate corruption. You can actually do that, to inspire the people. And when people see the president as being transparent, it can actually genuinely put them on the path of transparency. So it's nothing hard for the president to do. But again, it is within his jurisdiction to choose to do it publicly or not to do it. And I think he has chosen not to do it publicly. But I know he has actually declared his asset, because that's one of the requirements that you have to meet as the president. But to choose whether to do that publicly is actually his prerogative. He can decide to do so or not to do so.
All right, let's move to Nigeria-Niger border towns. You know, the Punch reports that the border towns live in fear over brewing rule. In the past week, this was a key conversation with the allegations of Nigeria working hand in hand with the French government to sort of working against Niger.
Country,
Nigeria, of course, has denied this, saying that there are no French bases in the country. But is this something that we should be afraid of? Although, I think, first of all, did you foresee that when Nigeria started frolicking with France, when the president went to France, we were going to land here?
Yeah. So, of course, I think it was on this platform that I said it. You see, if you study from 2014 February, where the crisis between Russia and Ukraine started, it's actually similar to this. And you remember annexation of Crimea was one of the major conversations that, and it was clear that Ukraine was going to join the NATO military alliance. So if that happens, Russia knows that it's going to be in some kind of trouble. If Ukraine continues to allow Russia take over Crimea, Ukraine knows that it's going to be trouble. So if your friend is actually very close to your enemy, then you have an upper hand, which is what has played out here. Either the Nigerian government is planning it or not, and I know that the Nigerian government may not be planning it. There's every reason for Niger to actually be strategically careful about what he's saying. It could be some sort of, what do they call this thing, that somebody will just come out to cry. But there's every reason to think, if I am moving away from a particular philosophy, and I said it last week, and my big brother, quote unquote, Nigeria, is moving towards the same philosophy, then there's every reason for me to be afraid. And thank God that some of the residents there have come out to say, oh, we haven't seen any military bases here, not even Nigeria military base. But again, it is about what the Nigerian government is doing at the moment, which is one of the reasons why it's going to be exceedingly difficult, if not practically impossible, for this bloc to come back to ECOWAS. Because you cannot continue to say, oh, we want you in, and the philosophy these people are running away from, you are actually moving in to have conversation with the philosophy. It is except if we want to lie to ourselves. It is not acceptable that France will continue to control sensitive issues within an independent state, independent country, including their reserve, their foreign reserve, including their central bank, including the decisions of their military. So it's going to get to a point that people must move out from this philosophy. And I understand Nigeria is looking for areas to actually gain and all of that, conversations, broaden their conversation as big brother. But again, we must be careful so that we do not put our neighbor in trouble. And you remember, it's this same thing that South Africa is running away from. That's why it's running away to BRICS. Philosophically, from the beginning, Mandela had run to the West to seek for assistance during the apartheid rule. But the West denied him. And that is why he moved away from the West philosophy. Until today, you discover that South Africa is always, quote-unquote, anti-West when it comes to their major foreign decision. And who knows whether they're also having conversation. So it's about having your place in the polity, in the Committee of Nations. And I think staying with France for some of these people is not the right thing to do. And for Nigeria frolicking or having conversation with France, it could also be, I totally believe that, it could also be because of the kind of president we have now. Because it's been said again and again that the president have personal relationship with the French president.
Yeah. You know, and it's also just important to highlight that it's not necessarily out of place to have these fears, you know, because the reactions that we've seen, you know, to the Nigerian leader are that, oh, he's just throwing tantrums and whatnot. But it's not, you know, out of place because history has shown us, you know, that when two leaders meet and when they talk about bilateral relations, a lot of times, you are only told the parts of the story that they want you to know.
Yeah.
You know, there's other parts of those details that you may not be aware of, you know, that might be revealed much, much later.
Yeah.
So it's not out of place for the Nigerian government to feel that way. And, you know, I've also, you know, I think I mentioned this last week that there has to be some clarity as to what exactly we're doing with France, you know, aside what we've been told. Hopefully there's not more than meets the eye. And then also the Nigeria relationship, you know, and how it would also affect us, you know, must not be played with. You know, we seem to be joking with it.
That has completely been battered. I mean, our relations with Niger, completely, because our governance focus is democratic. Those guys are not returning to democracy anytime soon. And there's also a fear within the government in Nigeria. You know, if military takes over from here, these are your neighbors. Yeah. So genuinely, you must be concerned. So these are some of the. So I think our relations with Niger is completely battered.
Okay.
And we should just look for a way to.
Let's hold on and hear from Barrister Tony, who's calling from Aja. Good morning. Thanks for calling. Please go ahead.
Hello.
Hello. Good morning. We can hear you. Please go ahead.
Okay. What I'm trying to say is that the guy on the studio there is not sound. He's not answered any of your questions.
What is the point that you're driving at, Barrister Tony?
My point I'm driving that 2 or 3 questions he asked him, there's none he has answered correctly. It's not sound.
Okay, can you help us clarify what questions he hasn't answered? And all right. Do you want to clarify the questions and then provide an answer, maybe?
Yes.
All right,
yes.
Go ahead.
Can I answer you?
Please go ahead.
The SERAP issue. Thank you.
Barrister Tony, are you there?
No, but...
All right. It seems that the network there's an issue with the network. Please call again because we want to hear your thoughts. But, you know, I think that whilst communicating our thoughts, it's important for us to be respectful with it. We can have different opinions, but it's important. We definitely want to hear your thoughts, but let's please be respectful with it. Whilst we await Barrister Tony's call back, I want us to quickly take another paper because there's a big story on the Nation newspaper. The front page says, direct payment of allocation to councils begins next month. And I think it's important because this has been a story that has, you know, had a lot of controversy. It said, all obstacles cleared, Lagos to hold election in 20 councils and 37 LCDAs next year. Edun Bagudu lists benefits of Saudi-Nigeria parley, investments and jobs coming. 2 plane crashes in one day, claim 180 lives. Nigeria condoles with South Korea over 179 deaths. Weather causes disruption of flights at UK airports. Defense headquarters, troops arrested 2 suspected terrorist logistics suppliers, 256 others in 1 week. Well done to our defense headquarters. NCC rules out telecom tariffs hike in January. Okpeo, we are grateful for this. Former U.S. President Jimmy Carter dies at 100. Hastrop gets staff of office as Owa Bokun of Ichesha land. INEC not set to fill vacant parliamentary seats. It's mischievous to accuse Tinubu of ethnicizing NNPCL, says Omokri. Let's start with the direct payment of allocation to councils beginning next month.
Yeah,
you know, because that's part of the argument. I mean, you've been following up with the story,
yes.
and people are asking, when exactly is this going to kick in?
I think the delay was actually a product of the fact that the government wanted to have a political solution, because at every point in time there would be conversation. It doesn't matter whether somebody has directed that it should be done this way. And I'm very clear. I think we are all clear about the fact that that allocation will be made, paid directly. Now, it is time for local government to take their responsibility very, very seriously. And of course, it's not yet over as to whether the people are the ones electing people that are in local government. Like I said the other time, it's still whatever the governor wants at the end of the day. My state is going to the poll by January 18, and you can tell the direction that things are going. Usually, it is the state in power or the party in power that clears all the local government seats, the councillors and the chairman and everything. So I think it's a good way to start. And now everybody will know how to hold their local government responsible. And when I say hold people responsible, it is not by going to their houses early in the morning to be seeking for school fee. Because we've actually abused that process of holding our leaders accountable. You saw the video that was making round on the social media of the number of people that were queuing in the front of the president's house. That is not, we cannot build a nation where people will continue to wake up very early to go and be meeting their representative to seek for peanut and expect them to be able to dispense dividend of democracy to them. That's not holding people responsible. If you are supposed to build market, what I mean is that you must be held responsible to build the market. But what we do in this part of the nation is that once he gives me a little bit of handout, oh, he has done the dividend of democracy. And research has shown that over the years, that giving out this handout has not helped anybody. There was a governor in my state, Olusegun Mimiko. When he became, because the philosophy of his government, he believed then that welfareism is achievement in democracy. So he has a way of empowering people, so to say, you know, they call it empowerment. I got to know people in 2007 who got Okada rider, who got as high as 250,000 naira across polling unit. After 3 weeks, they are back to square zero. It means that handing money to people directly under any guise cannot help them.
Yeah, I mean, but I think
and we've seen it in the Niger Delta zone.
It is also, you know, because of the understanding that the people have,
yes,
you know, of what the responsibility of their local government office should be. If, you know, that has not been culture for a long time, and they understood that local government office is responsible for marketplaces, government for bits and pieces of infrastructure here and there, make sure your environment is clean, some, you know, primary healthcare centers, it maybe would have been different, and they would be able to hold them to account better because they understand. But that system has been destroyed for so long.
Yeah.
You know, the local government allocations and that whole process has been destroyed for so long. The local government elections, even, there's so much of it that has been destroyed. And so when they have these crumbs to give to citizens, you know, I mean, they would obviously run to get their crumbs and get their tiny bags of rice. But I want us to speak to Roy, who's calling from Lagos. Good morning, Roy.
Good morning. Yeah. Good morning.
Morning. Please turn your TV's volume down.
Okay, it's turned off.
Go ahead.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Please go ahead.
Okay, good. I'm interested in the program going on. I think I learned what Mr. John Dotun airing on television. On the issue of Nigeria, he got it completely right. We cannot be going to start for everything policy. I thought National Assembly was questioning the president as to what and what that we're going to pass to do. We cannot sign anything to do that has to be Nigeria.
I think we're struggling with the audio, Roy, please. We have a few minutes left for this segment. If you can call, we're struggling to hear. I don't know if anyone else could hear.
Yes, he was talking about our relationship with Niger, really. That,
okay.
We cannot continue to think we want to keep them and be having fantastic relationship with France.
Yeah,
okay.
but how do you do that? You know, because if Nigeria says, in Nigeria's argument, it is that, well, we have a great relationship with France. You know, we're not going to discard that bilateral relationship simply because you're fighting with them. How do you create a balance there? Or how should President Tinubu create a balance?
Okay, so President Tinubu is not just the president of Nigeria. He's the chairman of ECOWAS. Yeah. You have to be able to, the diplomacy, tact, you must give assurance, as it were, that, oh, my conversations with France will not in any way affect you. But you know why people are not believing such conversation is because of the fact that when they pull out in the first place, the way he reacted to it, In fact, he was coming across as if he was going to have some kind of military intervention. So you can't have that earlier conversation. That has actually destroyed whatever it is that you want to build. And that's why I think it's very, very important to, even the barrister that called us,
Yeah,
that
I think he's back.
you can actually make your point without making an enemy. It's a huge chunk of conversation in diplomacy.
All right, Roy, quickly go ahead. Roy, can you hear us?
Network really
Okay,
is
it's gone
really
again.
a strong word. I want us to actually talk
Please go
about
ahead.
the story on the Daily Independent. I don't believe we've talked about that, the big story. 2025 budget, federal government earmarks 55.5 billion naira for presidential air fleet, proposes 8.6 billion naira to repair air navigational equipment. Seems we're back on the air fleet conversation.
Yeah. So one of the things, our budget currently, there's been a lot of conversation. You know, when you see the trillions, you think that we actually have a lot. But I want to point attention to this about the budget. Our budget compared to the 2024 budget rose with 74%. That's a huge. But that's in terms of nominal, in terms of the number, in terms of the figure. But in terms of real value, it actually shrunk by 23%. It tells you that when the budget was prepared in 2024 budget, the dollar was around 800 naira. But now we're looking at 1,500. So we're having this huge figure without huge value. And that's been my concern. When you talk about budget, it's not usually about the amount of money that is involved. You compare the impact you want to make with it. So all of these things are part of the conversations we continue to have. The 55 billion?
55 billion,
55
yes.
billion. You know, the conversation of cutting the cost of governance, actually talked about this the other time. A lot of people have actually said, oh, let's sell off some of our the presidential jet and all of that. Even when you don't sell off, what's it called? Your president is the symbol of your nation. What we are saying is that some of these travels that are unnecessary, we can cut down on them. Some of the engagements that are unnecessary, we can cut them down on them. In fact, you know, when the president was coming to the last media chat he had, he was talking about the fact that he cannot cut down the number of his cabinet and all of that. If you do all of these things, you will have created an impression to the community people that their taxation or the tax burden you're putting on them will go to development. But the fear in the marketplace is that when you put a tax burden on us, when you force us to pay, we hope it's not to service the needs and the interests of the political class. That's why they've been back and forth. So it's not about the reduction of the fleet. It's about the fact that we reduce some of the travels that are unnecessary. We don't want to see the president jetting across the community why it's not necessary. So I think these are the little conversation around the budget. But the fact that the budget has a huge number does not mean that it has a huge value compared to the 2024 budget.
Yeah, you know, and of course, you know, again, conversations on budget implementation. You know, how successful was 2024's budget? You know, how successful was 2023's budget? You know, that we have supplementary budgets, you know, that we're still running, you know, currently. And so, you know, these things, you know, should not be ignored, you know, before we then get into 2025. Because what we'll find is that nothing really will be different. We're going to pretty much do the same thing we did in 2024 and expect a different result. The figures are not adding up.
Yeah.
The expectations, you know, that the government has stated in its budget do not seem, you know, achievable. So in what way do we expect to achieve different, you know, in the coming year?
Yes, and that's why I've said that it's not about the money. It's about the fact that if you have 2 million as your budgetary allocation for the year, let's work reasonably to the point of expending about 1.9 million. Let's get to 90% completion or the execution of the projects that we have, so that at least that will drive up the believability of Nigeria in their government. But as long as we continue to have this figure, I told you it's an opportunity of creating a legal means to take money out of the purse of government. So it's not about the huge nature of the budget. And at the end of the day, all of this back and forth now, I pray that we are able to even manage the Naira in a way that it will be around that 1,500 that has been projected. In fact, our oil projection is to have 2.02 barrels per day. These are conversations, that has to be made. And if you have this quota, you must also remember that there are services that you need to make. There are some monies that have been collected upfront you need to service these people by providing crude. So, and if we still rely on crude as our mainstay in the economy, then we must do more to actually even produce, to target about 2.5 million barrels per day. These are conversations.
It's going to be tough. Final story that I want you to speak on.
Yeah.
It is mischievous to accuse Tinubu of ethnicizing NNPCL, says, well, Renault Mockery. That's grade 5.
So the conversations have been going on. I personally know the chairman of NNPCL. He's a Yoruba man. And they were trying to compare the people that have left there in recent time and the appointment that have actually been made. And they are all pointing to the direction of all of them being Yoruba. And I think this is what led to this conversation. And there's this thing El-Rufai said that I just want us to take seriously. And he said, 2 wrongs cannot make a right. He was indirectly saying, Tinubu, please don't repeat Buhari's mistake. Buhari appointed heavily from the north.
Yeah.
And the Tinubu that we know, the Tinubu that we have read about, will not ordinarily come across as a person who will just be making an appointment from the southwest or from the south. But with the way things are now, the truth is that the Minister for Petroleum is the president. It's from the south. The Minister of State Petroleum is from south-south, Lokpobiri. The chairman of NNPCL is from the south, I think Ondo State. Now they are saying by next year that the GMD will retire, and there's been accusation or allegation that the appointment may actually come to the south again. So I think we need to just balance something. As somebody, Tinubu is a nationalist, is a national figure. We are not expecting that we just keep appointing people from the south or from the southwest. And even within the southwest, people are also still complaining. My friends within the southwest will say, oh, don't say southwest, just say Lagos appointment. Even within the southwest. So these are some of the conversations that are happening in town.
When you say southwest, I automatically remember the story about Sharia court and Sharia law being established in southwest Nigeria and the rancor that has caused. It's not in the papers today, so we won't take it. Maybe when next we have you join us or to get your thoughts on that as well. Dotun Ojon, thank you for joining us this morning to review the papers.
It's a pleasure.